The courtroom that day was packed to capacity. The wooden chairs creaked under the weight of dozens of law students sitting shoulder to shoulder, holding their breath as they awaited their turn at the podium. Above them, the harsh white glow of neon lights cast a solemn glare upon the judge's face. A man in his 60s with meticulously groomed silvery hair and a black robe draped across his shoulders. He did not need to pound his gavel. The courtroom fell silent in an instant. Within that space, another pair of eyes stood out. Angela Johnson's eyes, a young 23-year-old black law student, her curly hair tied back neatly, her hands trembling slightly, yet her gaze unwavering. When her name was called, the entire room turned to look at her. Angela rose, clutching her stack of documents tightly. Ascending the wooden steps, the sound of her shoes echoed like a drumbeat against her own chest. This was only a mock trial in law school, a practical exercise for students to hone their advocacy skills. But to Angela, it meant so much more. It was a chance to prove she could do it, despite all the doubtful glances. Just as she stood at the podium, the judge narrowed his eyes and curled his lips into a smile. Not a smile of encouragement, but of humiliation. Leaning toward the microphone, his voice echoed throughout the room. "You, young woman, with your skin color and background, you do best to give up on your dream of becoming a lawyer." In that moment, the air seemed to freeze. Some students covered their mouths to stifle giggles. A few shared uneasy glances. 1 second, then 2, passed in silence. That mocking smile still hung on the judge's lips, like a blade slicing through the young woman's dignity. Angela felt her ears burn, her heartbeat racing, in front of all those people. Before one of the most powerful figures in the legal system, she had just been publicly humiliated for her skin color. It was not merely an insult. It was a slap to her dream, a brutal affirmation that justice was not meant for everyone. In that moment, it felt as though the lawyer's dream she had chased since childhood was about to shatter, vanish under the sneering laughter and contemptuous stares. But what no one expected was what Angela did next, and it silenced the whole courtroom. A response rang out, powerful enough to make the judge pause. A moment, not only changing the fate of one black student, but shaking the very faith in a legal system thought to be inviolable. Before Angela stepped into that courtroom, few knew that behind her calm smile and resolute gaze lay a childhood shadowed by injustice. Angela Johnson was born in a poor neighborhood, a place of potholed roads, graffiti-scarred walls, and the nightly wailing of police sirens as a familiar soundtrack. The people there, mostly black, knew firsthand that the law did not always stand with them. Angela's father had been a truck driver, gentle, hardworking, never involved in trouble. Yet one day, police stormed his truck, accidentally, discovering a few packets of drugs hidden in the cargo. He insisted he was innocent. He begged for fingerprint tests, but everyone turned a deaf ear. And then he was convicted, simply because he was a black man in a system steeped in prejudice. Angela was 8 when she saw her father handcuffed before her eyes. That was the first time she understood how swiftly justice could betray a person's innocence. Her mother, a thin woman with sleepless, dark-circled eyes, was forced to work 2 jobs, cleaning offices by day, serving in a diner by night, just enough to feed her children. Angela grew up listening through long nights by the window, her mother counting the meager wages, the sirens outside, and remembering her father's sadness behind prison bars. On those nights, she promised herself, "One day, I will become a lawyer, to defend the innocent like my father, so that no one will suffer injustice just because of their skin color." But the path to that dream was far from easy. In high school, Angela excelled, top of her class, near perfect test scores, yet scholarship applications kept getting rejected. Vague reasons were given, not outstanding enough, doesn't fit our criteria. But Angela knew, sometimes, it was her skin color that made those doors shut before she could knock. At school, white children often taunted her, "No matter how smart you are, you'll never be a real lawyer." Those words repeated like a knife slicing into her fragile dream. But Angela did not give up. She spent hours in the library, devouring worn law books, taking notes on every clause and precedent. While friends played, she practiced writing essays, rehearsed her arguments before the mirror. Upon entering the prestigious law school, Angela faced another invisible barrier: isolation. In a class filled with students from affluent families, children of lawyers, judges, politicians, she was one of the few female students of color. Whenever she walked into lecture halls, she felt the whispering gazes, the murmurs. They just let her in so they can say they're diverse. But if anyone thought Angela would sit quietly and accept it, they were wrong. She didn't just study, she excelled, with a phenomenal memory and razor-sharp analytical skills. Angela could quote exact statutes and precedents, crafting arguments that could sway even the most critical professors. Her talent garnered admiration, but also envy. Some white students began mocking her, expressing disdain whenever she spoke. Even conservative professors sometimes showed clear bias, consistently underestimating her in discussions. Yet, adversity made Angela even stronger. Every contemptuous look, every ridicule, became fuel for her determination. And all those experiences, from her wretched childhood to the days of being underrated, shaped Angela into a resilient, sharp young woman. When she walked into that mock courtroom, she wasn't just a student trying her hand, she was a warrior carrying her childhood vow. But she did not know that the greatest challenge of that day would not come from legal arguments, nor from her debate opponent, but from the person in the highest seat, the judge himself. If there was one thing that set Angela apart from hundreds of other law students, it was her sharp debating skills and extraordinary memory. There was a class once where a professor invited a guest speaker, a well-known attorney, to challenge the students. The man stood at the front and presented a complex argument about freedom of speech, then dared anyone to counter it within 5 minutes. The classroom fell dead silent. No one dared to stand up. But Angela was different. She took just a few seconds to jot down her notes before rising to her feet without hesitation. In only 3 minutes, Angela dissected every weak point in the argument, cited relevant case laws, and proved that the speaker's claim was riddled with contradictions. The room erupted. Students stood and clapped. Some were so shocked their jaws dropped. The guest attorney, instead of being upset, burst out laughing with genuine amusement. "Young lady, if you keep this up, I fear one day I might have to face you in court." That was not just a small victory. It proved that Angela did not simply memorize laws. She deeply understood the human meaning behind every statute. To her, the law was not a set of dry words. It was a tool to protect people, especially the vulnerable. That skill made Angela a familiar face in academic debates. There was one time a conservative professor deliberately posed a tricky question, hoping to prove that this black girl was just a passing phenomenon. But Angela responded calmly. Not only did she cite the law word for word, but she also recounted a historic case in which the first black attorney bravely stood up to defend justice. The entire class went silent, and that very professor, known for being harsh, had no choice but to nod and acknowledge. This young woman does not just study the law, she lives it. However, the more Angela stood out, the more she became a thorn in the side of those holding deep-rooted prejudices. A group of white students often whispered mocking remarks behind her back. They called her the memory machine, implying that Angela only knew how to memorize, not truly think. Once, one of them cornered her in the hallway, smirked, and said, "You can memorize every law in the book, but justice in this country has never been on your side. Remember that." Angela did not reply. She simply looked him straight in the eye and walked away, because deep down, she knew her real battle was not in school hallways. It was out there, in a society steeped in injustice. And that is why, before that fateful mock trial, Angela prepared more thoroughly than anyone else. She pulled all-nighters, studying every file, analyzing every detail, imagining every counter-argument her opponent might raise. In her coat pocket, she always carried a small photo of her father, his sorrowful face behind prison bars. As a reminder, this was not just an assignment, but a test of her lifelong dream. When she walked into that courtroom, Angela believed she was ready to take on any student. But what she did not expect was that the true challenge would not come from a classmate. It would come from the very judge himself, the powerful figure capable of crushing an entire generation's faith with a single, prejudiced sentence. After the judge uttered that humiliating remark, the courtroom plunged into a suffocating silence. Some students lowered their heads, pretending to take notes. A few let out nervous laughs, then quickly went quiet, afraid of drawing attention. Angela's eyes were blazing. She gripped her folder so tightly her fingers turned pale. Her heart pounded, but a voice echoed in her mind. If you stay silent now, you may never get another chance for the rest of your life. She took a deep breath and lifted her chin. Her voice trembled at first, but every word that followed cut like a blade. Your Honor, his skin color determines who gets to be a lawyer. Then justice must have died in this room a long time ago. The courtroom fell into dead silence. The judge raised his eyebrows, visibly rattled. He did not expect an intern to challenge him so boldly in public. Angela did not stop. Her eyes burned bright. Her voice grew stronger. I am not standing here just to complete an assignment. I am standing here because I carry with me the stories of thousands of families abandoned by this very system. She spoke of her father, a gentle man, falsely accused of drug possession and convicted simply for being black. Her voice wavered briefly, but she quickly regained control. When I was 8 years old, I watched my father get handcuffed, not because he broke the law, but because he did not have the right skin color to be heard. Do you know what that feels like? To watch justice become a wall that only opens for those born with privilege. The mood in the room shifted. The whispers stopped. Some students looked down, avoiding her eyes. Angela took a step forward, her voice now firm as stone. You told me to give up on becoming a lawyer. Then let me ask, who does justice belong to? To those who sit on high benches, or to all the people seeking truth? She went on to cite landmark cases. The Brown versus Board of Education case, where a black lawyer changed American education, breaking the barriers of racial segregation in schools. The Gideon versus Wainwright case, where the Supreme Court ruled that even the poorest citizens deserve the right to legal defense. Each time she named a precedent, her voice rang across the room, every word like an arrow piercing the silence of those watching. Then Angela paused and stared straight into the judge's eyes. Unblinking, it felt as if the entire courtroom had vanished, leaving only two people, an arrogant judge and a young black woman challenging him in the very arena of his power. Are you here to uphold the law, or to uphold the privilege of a single skin color? 1 second of silence. 2. The room held its breath. Then, clap. A single pair of hands applauded. One student, then another, then a third. Before long, nearly half the room stood, clapping thunderously, despite the furious glare of the judge. His face turned red, his hands clenched the armrests. He wanted to bang the gavel to restore order, but deep down, he knew that order had already shattered the moment Angela raised her voice. The applause that filled the courtroom that day was not just a fleeting moment. It was a wave, rising from the hearts of young people who had just witnessed Angela's courage. Spreading throughout the halls of that prestigious law school, the mock trial ended, but its impact never did. The very next day, several students wrote articles for the school paper, describing in vivid detail the moment Angela stood up against blatant racism. Someone had secretly recorded the incident on their phone, and within days, the video was shared across social media platforms. Thousands of views, tens of thousands of comments. People were not just amazed by Angela's eloquence, they were outraged by the arrogance of the judge. Public pressure exploded. Major media outlets picked up the story. Reporters camped outside the law school, trying to interview witnesses. No one could ignore the truth anymore. A judge had openly humiliated a black female student in front of dozens of people during the trial session. The school administration had no choice but to call an emergency meeting. Professors, students, and even renowned alumni spoke out. The pressure mounted on the disciplinary board. And finally, a statement was issued. The judge would be formally reprimanded and temporarily suspended from some teaching duties. But what came next was the most surprising of all. The school announced, in recognition of her courage in standing up for justice, Angela Johnson will be awarded a special honorary scholarship that will cover her full tuition until graduation. The day she received the news, Angela nearly broke into tears. In her heart, the image of her father came rushing back, the man who had once been handcuffed in injustice. If he were alive to witness this moment, he would be so proud. 1 year later, Angela graduated at the top of her class. At the graduation ceremony, The entire auditorium stood as she walked across the stage to receive her degree. Not just because of her academic record, but because everyone knew she had fought for her dream with her whole heart, driven by the belief that justice does not belong to one skin color. After graduation, Angela received an offer from one of the most prestigious law firms in the United States. But instead of choosing the easy path, Angela chose to work in the Human Rights Division, where she could defend people like her father, the vulnerable, the poor, the ones abandoned by the system. Every time she steps into a courtroom, Angela carries with her that old photo of her father. She keeps it in her coat pocket, like a symbol, a reminder to herself. Justice is not some distant ideal. It is breath, it is life, it is the right of every human being to be heard. Many years have passed since the day Angela Johnson walked out of that mock courtroom. Her story did not end with a moment of defiance in a classroom. It became a source of inspiration for an entire generation. Today, Angela is one of the most prominent young human rights lawyers in the United States. She has defended clients in high-profile cases, protected the innocent who were wrongfully accused, stood by poor families who could not afford attorneys, and fought for communities left in the shadows of the legal system. The media calls her the fearless voice of justice. Law students mention her name with reverence. But more importantly, thousands of young black students have found in Angela's journey a guiding light. They realized that skin color does not define intelligence. Background does not define dreams. Only perseverance, courage, and belief in oneself truly shape a person's path. Angela often says in her speeches, "I do not want to be the exception. I want to be the proof that anyone can rise up and fight back. Anyone can become a lawyer, a judge, a defender of justice if they refuse to give up." And that is the message this story wants to leave with you. The viewers watching this screen right now, if you believe that justice should belong to everyone, regardless of skin color, gender, or background, if you believe that every person deserves to be heard, to be protected, and to be respected, then please share Angela's story. Because who knows, one click from you today might spark hope in someone out there standing on the edge between hope and despair. And do not forget, hit like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. Let us spread the voice of justice together, so that justice is no longer just words in a book, but a reality for everyone.